In the United States at present, the largest denomination is Catholic. It has been for a very long time. But the reason that it is still the largest right now is Hispanics who are coming in and Catholic. The second largest denomination in the United States now is the ex-Catholics. And no other denomination comes anywhere near. You know, we're still a Protestant country where there is a Protestant majority, but they're in so many separate compartments.
Correct.
The two biggest compartments are Catholics, ex-Catholics. Well, in my book on the crisis of confidence in the Catholic Church, what I'm interested in is an analysis. What's gone wrong? What's happening? And these are the kinds of things. This absolute self-righteousness, a kind of culture of control. The guys on top are so much in charge. Everyone else is to submit and be within their control. This isn't exactly what Jesus was doing. People are inclined in the church hierarchy to ask, what's wrong with people that they're not listening to us? Instead of asking, are we doing something wrong? 50 years ago, I was doing my theology studies in Germany. I had 4 years in Frankfurt. But I had been in the Jesuit then since my 18th birthday, which was 1949. And all right, I had been to a Jesuit high school, Boston College High School. I was really impressed with Jesuits, particularly the guy who had been my first Jesuit teacher. A real model for me, a guy named Richard P. Burke. He was a tremendous character. I went to Union Theological Seminary in New York. It's supposed to be ecumenical theology. You know, I asked people, what should I do for this ecumenical theology? And a very wonderful character, a man named Gregory Baum, he was an Augustinian theology teacher up in Toronto, wrote back to me and he told me, Ray, do not go to Europe. Do not do Calvin studies or Luther studies. No American Catholics know beans about American Protestants. Go to a good Protestant divinity school. And that was Union Theological. While I was there, I got into what most of my life has been about. The Northern Ireland conflict got rolling. I was there through the latter 60s. And come 1969, Northern Ireland got looking like the 17th century with Catholics and Protestants killing each other. You know, in a conflict generally, there's a stronger party and a weaker party. The weaker party is usually getting kicked around. There's something right and wrong in there. And you have to be able to acknowledge that. But at the same time, not think that that means these are bad people and these are good people, because they may both be pretty vicious. I was very determined I was going to meet all the people who were the conflict. And I made a supposition, fundamental supposition. I'm not dealing with psychopaths. These are people who are doing things that I don't like for reasons that make sense to them. I better find out what that is. They weren't used to all being approached with respect. That's something that people involved in a conflict, they get classified. They're the terrorists, they are the men of violence, they're the rebels and all of this. And to be treated as reasonable people who are doing things for reasons that make sense to them is a new experience. People in a conflict, they live in a bubble. They never get to talk to anybody who isn't of their own choir. And they have very negative stereotypes of everybody on the other side. They know all about them and they know they're no good. But they're very curious what makes them tick. One of the things I learned about techniques for conflict resolution, never believe that you can fit other people's suffering into your own little boxes. Your theories have to be tested by every case. And it has to involve a whole lot of listening to the other person. If you don't hear them, if you aren't ready to take what they've got, including a fair amount of abuse, you're not in the right business. Knowing that I can't fit people's suffering into my little box. In a conflict, we have a stronger side and a weaker side. The weaker side is safe unless the stronger side has some sort of an internal conflict, something eating at them. In that case, they need somebody to blame. That's going to be the weaker party, scapegoat. And the scapegoat, the weaker party, there are things, they have a grievance. They know what's happening to them. If the stronger party doesn't have some sort of internal thing eating at them, the weaker party can be as much in your face as possible and it's safe. But anything they do against a suffering party is going to be held against them. And another part of what they do is to play victim. You know, when you play what awful things are happening to me, and I play that tune all the time, and everything about me is revenge, that's an invitation to violence. I'm going to get kicked. This has gotten to be my standard process in dealing with people in a whole lot of conflicts. Find out what is happening. If I can come to sort of an agreed understanding of what it is that's going on, that's agreed by all sides, then there are options that come from that. There are other possibilities. What else could people be doing besides shooting each other? And what I've found is that it can be very difficult for people in a conflict to really accept that some alternative to shooting each other is going to get them anywhere. But if they do realize that there is an alternative, I've yet to meet the people who don't realize then that the violence is no longer legitimate. I've been up to my eyeballs in the Middle Eastern conflicts, not only Israelis and Palestinians, but Lebanon, some Syria, some Egypt, a lot of parts of the Middle East. Boy, we approach this war on terror very vengefully. We will find them and we will kill them. The fundamental thing, whether it's husband and wife or whether it's classmates, is the respect you show for each other. If you're not able to recognize the reality of the other person as a human being entitled to stuff from me, then the conflict isn't going to get settled. It's just going to be a continuing grudge, probably with a lot of harm done, maybe violence done in the meantime. But if you really have that respect, I've always found that people in conflicts who are being talked about as the evil people all the time, the terrorists, whatever, I go talk to them. If I'm not in any kind of situation, if I'm not talking to the people who are the trouble, I'm not talking to the right people. One of the things I knew from the start, if there was ever going to be a peace, peace had to be made by the people who were the war. The initiatives for ceasefires and negotiation had to come from the people who were really doing the fighting. Conflict transformation. You transform the conflict when people see each other differently, when people see each other humanly, not just as enemies. But you don't get everything fixed. You never get everything fixed. And if you get into work with conflicts, you have to figure you're going to do a lot of waiting. Takes some time. Takes a lot of listening, and if it isn't done with a great deal of patience with people who are going to be in your face all the time, then you shouldn't be in the business. It is proper to a Christian, I would say it's proper to anybody, to save the proposition of another rather than to condemn it as false. Now, that isn't the way people usually act. People win arguments. And I've realized if I'm going to spend my life winning arguments, I have shut my mind down and I'm never going to learn anything else. If I can't learn from other people, and especially from people that I don't agree with. And the way Ignatius places this, you find, you hear the other guy's proposition. That proposition is what's really important to the other person. Things that are really the result of a life experience. What I find is really the essential. If you're going to be the third party, don't take sides. they have enough partisans already. They don't need any more. So if you take a partisan side, you're excess baggage. And be able to treat people doing things that you find very bad, be able to treat them as people deserving of respect, their humanity. And they need to be given the opportunity and really stuff put in front of them to recognize that humanity in each other. I always realize that you have people who talk about things and people who do things. I like to have both. And here I had been so many years doing the direct conflict interventions without the background of an academic setting that gives me a setting of criticism. I needed that. So I had been 9 years living in England doing this. I had been another 3 years in Washington. I needed to learn how it works with an American government. I knew how it worked with European ones, British, Irish, and some others. So I spent 3 years doing that in Washington. But then I came back up here to Boston College so that I would have that atmosphere. And teaching. I'm teaching stuff that is different. In a theology department, I'm kind of a marginal figure because I'm doing different things than a theology department expects to be doing. I have a lot of students who are following in the kind of work I do. I've worked a lot even living in a Jesuit community. I've had students, not necessarily my own students, but young Jesuits from all over the world who are doing their doctorates here. And I've kept nobbling them to get into conflict studies. And a whole lot of them have. And what I wanted to see is that there would be young Jesuits in all of these countries who had really learned the ropes enough to be resources. There's a core in people that you have to find and has to be expected, and they have to be treated with respect as having that. For people involved in conflicts who are being accused of all sorts of terrible things all the time, probably doing them, it comes as a big surprise to be treated with respect by anybody. And that's really one of the big advantages if you are going to work with a conflict, to treat people with that respect. I realized a number of years ago that in the Holy Catholic Church, we are having ourselves a bit of a civil war. And that was so evident to me. At the time of the sex abuse crisis suddenly becoming what everybody heard about the Catholic Church. The sex abuse, go back centuries, you're going to find it. And it was always something you didn't talk about. We have a culture in the Catholic Church, we have a culture in a lot of places where you don't make trouble and you don't talk about things that you're not supposed to talk about, or you get in trouble. That was always true for Catholic bishops. If they let this kind of thing out, they were in trouble. So things were not talked about. I was saying then we are in a crisis of Reformation size. If the Holy Church at this point does what it did at the time of the Reformation, was completely defensive and self-righteous, that will lead to just as much division as the Reformation did. But this time, instead of forming extra churches, what people are going to do is walk out. Nobody is fessing up. They aren't really admitting that it could be that bad. Cover up. Don't let any bad news out. It's very much like the situation with the government of the United States, or with a company like Enron, or how many of these affairs have we had where big outfits don't want bad news? The Catholic Church has done it the same way and ought to know better. The thing that is the object of faith is not the church. The church is an instrument for organizing a community of faith. And if that faith isn't there, if the church becomes a substitute object of faith, you're in big trouble. and it always tends to be. What I would like to see Catholics able to do is to get deeply into faith, which has to involve a commitment to other people. If you recognize that image of God in the other, then you're going to treat them that way.